Hi, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. Really glad to be back with you again tonight, continuing to read in our story, On the Banks of Plum Creek by Laura Ingalls Wilder. We're already on chapter 27. Now, yesterday, if you remember, Pa took off walking early in the morning, headed back east so he could get some work, because there'd be no crops again next year because the grasshoppers were laying eggs. So we're going to continue. Rain. Everything was flat and dull when Pa was gone. Laura and Mary could not even count the days till he would come back. They could only think of him walking further and further away in his patched boots. Jack was a sober dog now, and his nose was turning gray. Often he looked at the empty road where Pa had gone and sighed, and he laid down to watch it. But he could not really hope that Pa would come. The dead Eaton prairie was flat under the hot sky. Dust devils rose up and whirled around it. I'm not sure if you know what a dust devil is. I've seen them before. And it looks like a little mini tornado. So I will notice them in the fall around here, where suddenly leaves will begin swirling up bigger and bigger and bigger, just in this little pile. It's not very big usually, but they're fun. But in this case, they weren't leaves, they were just dust. The faraway edge of it seemed to crawl like a snake. Ma said it was caused by the heat waves of the air. The only shade was in the house. There were no leaves on willows or plum thickets. Plum Creek dried up. There was only a little water in the pools, its pools. The well was dry, and the old spring by the dugout was only a drip. Ma set a pail under it to fill during the night. In the morning, she brought that to the house and left another pail to fill during the day. When the morning work was done, Ma and Mary and Laura and Carrie sat in the house. The scorching winds whizzed by, and the hungry cattle never stopped lowing. They were kind of crying because they were hungry. Spot was thin. Her hip joints stuck up sharp, and all of her ribs showed, and there was hollows around even her eyes. All day she went mooing with the other cattle, looking for something to eat. They had eaten all the little bushes along the creek and gnawed the willow branches as high up as they could reach. Spot's milk was bitter, and every day she gave less of it. Sam and David, the horses, stood in the stable. They did not have all the hay they wanted because the haystacks must last until next spring. When Laura led them down the dry creek bed to the old swimming hole, they curled their noses at the warm, scummy water, but they had to drink it. Cows and horses had to bear things too. Saturday evenings, Laura went to the Nelsons to see if a letter had come from Pa. She went along the little path beyond the footbridge. It did not go on wandering forever through pleasant places. It went to Mr. Nelson's. Mr. Nelson's house was long and low, and its board walls were whitewashed. His long, low sod table had a stable had a thick roof made of hay. They did not look like Pa's house and Pa's stable. They cuddled to the ground under a slope on the prairie, and they looked as if they spoke Norwegian. I guess they were in a dugout too. The house was shining clean inside. The big bed was plumped high with feathers, and pillows were high and fat. On the wall hung a beautiful picture of a lady dressed in blue. Its frame was thick gold, and bright pink mosquito netting covered the lady and the frame to keep the flies off. There was no letter from Pa. Mrs. Nelson said that Mr. Nelson would ask again at the post office next Saturday. "Thank you, ma'am," Laura said, and she hurried fast along the path. Then she walked slowly across the footbridge and more slowly up the knoll. Ma said, "Never mind, girls. There'll be a letter next Saturday." But next Saturday there was no letter. They did not go to Sunday school anymore. Carrie could not walk so far, and she was too heavy for Ma to carry. Laura and Mary must save their shoes. They could not go to Sunday school barefoot, and if they wore out their shoes, they would have no shoes for next winter. So on Sundays, they put on their best dresses, but not their shoes or their ribbons. Mary and Laura said their Bible verses to Ma, and she read to them from the Bible. One Sunday, she read to them about the plagues of locusts long ago in Bible times. Locusts were grasshoppers, Ma read this story. And the locusts went up for the land of Egypt and rested on all the coast of Egypt. Very grievous they were. It means just caused a lot of heartbreak. For they covered the face of the whole earth, so that the land was darkened, and they did eat every herb of the land, and all the fruit of the trees which the hail had left, and there remained not any green thing on the trees, or in the herbs of the fields throughout the land of Egypt. Laura knew how true that was. When she repeated those verses, she thought, "Through the land of Minnesota." Then Ma read the promise that God made to the good people, to bring them out of that land to a good land, to a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey. "Oh, what is that, Ma?" Mary asked, and Laura asked, "How could a land flow with milk and honey?" She did not want to walk in milk or sticky honey. Ma rested the big Bible on her knees and thought. Then she said, "Well, your pa thinks it'll be right here in Minnesota." "How could it be?" Laura asked. "Maybe it will be if we stick to it," said Ma. "Well, Laura, if good milk cows were eating grass all over this land, they would give a great deal of milk, and then the land would be flowing with milk. Bees would get honey out of all the wildflowers that would grow out on the land, and the land would be flowing with honey." "Oh," Laura said, "I'm glad we wouldn't have to walk in it." Carrie beat the Bible with her little fists and cried, "I'm hot, I'm prickly." Ma picked her up, but she pushed at Ma and whimpered, "You're hot." Poor little Carrie's skin was red with the heat rash. Laura and Mary were sweltering inside their underwaists and their drawers and petticoats and long sleeve high neck dresses with tight waistbands around their middles. The backs of their necks were smothering under their braids. Carrie wanted a drink, but she pushed the cup away and made a face and said, "Nasty." "You better drink it," Mary said. "I want a cold drink too, but there isn't any." "I wish I had a drink of well water," Laura said. "I wish I had an icicle," Mary said. Then Laura said, "I wish I was an Indian and didn't have to wear any clothes." "Laura," Ma said, "and on Sunday." Laura thought, "Well, I do." The wood smell of the house was a hot smell. On the brown streaks in the boards, and the juice was dripping down sticky and drying in hard yellow beads. That's because it was so hot the pitch in the wood was melting. The hot wind never stopped whizzing by, and the cattle never stopped mooing. Moo, moo. Jack turned on his side and groaned a long sigh. Ma sighed too and said, "Seems to me I'd give almost anything for a breath of air." At that very minute, A breath of air came into the house. Carrie stopped whimpering. Jack lifted up his head. Ma said, "Girls, did you?" Just then another cool breath came. Ma went out through the lean-to to the shady end of the house. Laura scampered after her, and Mary came leading Carrie. Outdoors was like a baking oven. The hot air came scorching across Laura's face. In the northwest sky, there was a cloud, though. It was small in the enormous brassy sky, but it was a cloud, and it made a streak of shade on the prairie. The shadow seemed to move, but perhaps it was only the heat waves. No, it was really coming nearer. "Oh, please, please, please," Laura kept saying silently with all of her might. They all stood shading their eyes and looking at that cloud in its shadow. The cloud kept coming nearer. It grew larger. It was a thick, dark streak in the air above the prairie. Its edge rolled and swelled in big puffs. Now gusts of cool air came, mixed with gusts of hotter than ever air. All over the prairie, dust devils rose up wild and wicked, whirling their dusty arms. The sun still burned on the house and the stable and cracked on the cracked, pitted earth. The shadow of the cloud was far away. Suddenly, a fire-white streak zigzagged, and the gray curtain fell from the cloud and hung there, hiding the sky beyond it. Do you know what that white zigzag was? It's right, lightning. It was rain. There came a growl of thunder after it. "It's too far away, girls," Ma said. "I'm afraid it won't get to us. But anyway, the air's cooler." A smell of rain came on the streaks of coolness through the hot air. "Oh, maybe it will get to us, Ma. Maybe it will," Laura said. Inside themselves, they were saying, "Please, please, please." And here's what the picture looked like. The wind blew cooler. Slowly, slowly, the cloud grew. Larger and larger came the shadow. Now the clouds spread wide in the sky. Suddenly, a shadow rushed across the flat land and up the knoll. And faster after it came the marching rain. It came up the knoll like millions of tiny trampling feet, and the rain poured down on the house and on Ma and Mary and Laura and Carrie. "Get in quick," Ma exclaimed. The lean-to was noisy with rain on the roof. Cool air blew through it into the smothery house. Ma opened the front door. She fastened back the curtains, means tied them back, and opened every window. A sick smell steamed up from the ground, but the rain poured down and washed it away. Rain drummed on the roof. Rain poured through the eaves. Rain washed the air and made it good to breathe again. Sweet air rushed through the house. It lifted the heaviness out of Laura's head and made her skin feel good. Streams of muddy water ran swiftly over the hard ground. They poured into the cracks and filled them up. They dimpled and swirled over the pits where the grasshopper eggs were and left smooth mud there. Overhead, lightning flickered sharp and thunder crashed. Carrie clapped her hands and shouted, and Mary and Laura danced and laughed. Jack wiggled and scampered just like a puppy. He looked out at the rain from every window, and when the thunder banged and crashed, he growled at it. "Rrrr! Who's afraid of you?" "I do believe this is going to last till sunset," Ma said. Just before sunset, the rain went away. Down across the Plum Creek and away across the prairie to the east it went, leaving only a few sparkling drops falling in the sky. Then the cloud turned purple and red and curled golden edges across the clear sky. The sun sank and the stars came out. The air was cool, and the earth was damp and grateful. The only thing that Laura wished that Pa could be there. Next day, the sun rose burning hot again. The sky was brassy and the winds were scorching. And before night, tiny spears of grass were prickling up from the ground. In a few days, there was a green streak across the brown prairie. Grass came up where the rain had fallen, and the hungry cattle grazed there. Every morning, Laura put Sam and David on picket lines so they could eat the good grass too. The cattle stopped bawling. Spot's bones did not show any more. She gave more milk. It was good, sweet milk. The knoll was green again, and the willows and plums were putting out tiny leaves, all because of that one day that they got rain. Well, that's the end of that chapter. And that's how God blesses us with rain after a drought, which is what they had had. I know that we had rain the other day, and I told my son the day after I could see a little mist of green on the field. Now, he didn't think he saw it, but I went out again today, and that's been, about 5 days now, and there's definitely green grass where it was all brown. So I understand what they mean there, but thankfully it's not so hot here. Well, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I want to pray blessings on you and on yours, in your house and out of your house, in the day and in the night. Whatever you do, keep dreaming. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And after you subscribe, a little bell will come up. If you poke that little bell, then you will receive notifications of every time I post a video. I post them on a lot of things. Stories, things that happen around the homestead, things with my animals, places I go. Well, I just want to say good night for now. I'll be back again tomorrow. Good night. God bless you.